We got a new guy.
Yep, that I'm okay with.
We filmed the 7th episode and realized that it's not good with just the two of us, so we had to bring on extra help.
We realized there were some major gaps.
Welcome, everybody, to the Work Harder, Not Smarter podcast. Here's the deal. Owning a small business can suck, but by listening to us and playing your cards right, it might just suck a little less. Good.
Morning, Vietnam.
Good. You want to let me talk?
Sorry.
It's ruined. Good morning, Vietnam.
I cannot make it into the...
I am actually super excited for freaking how this podcast is going to go from here on out. For everybody listening, we brought on another co-host. This is our introduction to Steve.
So thank you for that. When I listened to the first few episodes of this podcast, I thought, this isn't very good. And what my fear is that it isn't going to get better.
What kind of... That's your
Well,
take?
I'm glad you're here.
So when I see a sinking ship, like most people, I jump on it. I've known Colton and Jeremy for a while.
Who are you, Steve? Why are you on
How
this
did this come
podcast?
about? How did you hear about it? Why are you here?
So, okay.
What is your intention?
So,
Set me some expectations.
Expectate me.
So
I like that.
So Jeremy and Colton started this podcast, and it's really good. I really enjoy.
You just called it a sinking ship.
He jumped on.
That I got
a compliment.
on it. I'm bought into this. Sinking
Okay,
ship.
all right, I get you.
No, and Jeremy asked me to come on. He said, "Oh man, we're gonna have to have you on, and offer your perspective." So, like you guys, I am also part of the small business industry. I work for a little company stationed out of Washington D.C. called the Department of Defense. You might have heard of it.
Nice.
I'm in the military. I've been in for 18 years. So I've learned a couple things along the way about leading people and being led by people. And is there a problem?
No, I'm just super interested. This is great.
No, dude. So, and when you guys were kind of describing what the intent of the podcast was, from a small business standpoint, and as I was listening to some of the episodes, a lot of it is, I mean, you can view it through the lens of somebody who's trying to start a small business, but really most of the concepts you guys are talking about, you can find parallels and application into most industries.
Absolutely.
And most different levels of leadership, right? Yeah. And so that's where I think that a lot of people can stand to benefit, if for nothing else, to generate some thought and maybe do a little bit of reflection on the environment that they're in or want to create.
No, for sure.
Does that make sense?
No, for sure. I really do think that a lot of what we talk about isn't confined to small business owners.
No.
Like employees, anybody can benefit and improve their career with the principles that we talk about.
Well, and we all have such different perspectives on so many different things that I think it's going to be interesting, because Steve's not going to agree with a lot of what I say because I grew up in the hard knocks. He grew up in a lot more structured.
He's a privileged white male.
No.
What?
Well, yeah.
Hold on a second.
But no, but you know what I'm saying? And now you're in a very structured career path. I started a business from nothing and literally had to learn everything from hard knocks. So you have a lot more structured way of thinking. I have a lot more, like, basically, I felt like it was the right thing to do, so I did it. Right?
Monday.
So does it tell us when we can expect to compete with Joe Rogan?
It's all never.
No.
Years.
I predict that, and that's going to be 6 months from now.
Oh, wow. That's ambitious. Okay, so let's talk about setting expectations and why he can't get expectations.
What the chuff? Okay, let's get into it.
Why he can't get them?
Why he doesn't understand? Because of crap like that. 6 months, we're going to be where Joe Rogan's at.
Do you know what sarcasm is, or a joke? Obviously not.
So here's my question. You guys don't seem to like each other very much.
Dude,
that's right. Did you not hear episode 1?
No, I did. And Colton doesn't seem to be very good at construction.
So yet he's still there.
So this,
yeah. What exactly are we?
what is this podcast?
What are we sharing with the world? This feels like dirty laundry, which is fine. People like dirty laundry. I mean, look at TMZ or whatever. But
Okay, well, that's Steve.
That was a
Super
good
excited.
intro.
I'm really excited about it. Steve has a lot to offer to the podcast.
Very much.
He's going to be a great help making it suck less. Just kidding.
let's cage
No,
our
I think-
expectations.
I think he's going to help out a ton,
Yeah.
and it's going to bring a lot of value to you guys. So,
Very true.
what are we talking about? What are we talking about today, Steve?
So Jeremy had floated last week. One of the things that he's been kind of working on is setting and managing expectations. There's some of these concepts that you guys have already talked about and stuff that we'll continue to talk about that apply whether you're an entry-level employee or a mid-level manager or a business owner or a government freaking scab like me. You know what I mean? Like a lot of this stuff is universal. And so I think it's a lot of, professional development. I think it's probably a good way or an okay way to cage it. Ideally, we will all kind of progress through as we develop professionally and move through our careers. So I don't want to, all that to say, I wouldn't focus necessarily on, if we say small business owners, well, that's just your one piece in what could be several steps through the same process, right? And so, and I think the perspectives that we have are pretty well representative of that. I'm middle management in the Air Force. Like that's where I exist. At the unit level, I'm leadership, but grand scheme, I'm middle management, or probably lower middle management. Really, you are
bottom of the barrel. Like I'm scraping.
Well, that's not true.
I'm scraping.
Well, now you are because you're out of a job.
surprise.
Yeah, I work.
We're gonna do an episode on unemployment, Colton.
What are you
You're
trying to
as
say?
the subject matter expert, the only one of us that's unemployed. So, how did you guys get to the point where you are now? Like, did you have so you hired Colton? How old was he when he first started working for you?
18.
Yeah, about 18.
18. You didn't do any work for him prior to that.
I'd help
no, that
you.
was Bryson.
I was never like
Bryson did
employed, but I would help him on like projects.
So you do like
down
odd
there.
jobs,
Yeah,
but you weren't
not an official.
I was not an
employee.
employee until I was 18.
Okay, so, but you guys already had a working, quote unquote, a working relationship prior because
Probably about 6 years
from
before
being in
that.
scouting
Before that,
and all those
Correct.
things, right? So when he became an employee of yours, like a no kidding on the payroll employee, did you guys do this? Did you sit down and say, "Hey, here's the expectations"?
I honestly, I don't remember.
I don't think so.
I don't
to
remember.
be honest, because when when you first hired me, it was right before I left for El Paso.
Yeah,
It
he was
probably
only there for
4
like
months.
3 or 4 months.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it was kind of just like
He was just there as a helper. There wasn't
Almost,
really
yeah.
expectations other than you.
it was
do
almost
what
the attitude.
he
Hey,
needs to
just
help.
work for me for 4 months until you leave. And
Yeah.
like that's it.
So there wasn't.
I don't think.
and I wasn't expecting him to come back. I mean, I was hoping, but I wasn't expecting.
But
so
even when I came back,
there were expectations when you came back. 100%. Because
Not that I
remember,
can
you were like,
think.
I don't want to do that, and I was like, no, you don't have to do that. This is what you're going to be doing. This is how we're going to grow. This is the next steps. I told you everything that we were going to be hopefully doing, and thankfully it came true. But those expectations, to a point, probably not as in depth as it should have been, but the expectations were set of what you were going to be doing, what I wanted you to be doing in the future.
they could have been. I can't remember. All I remember is the expectation for pay was covered.
Well,
The expectation for a general sense of the job of what I was going to be doing was decking.
Yeah.
Like you said, you're going to build decks.
Well, we went through the quality that I expected.
That's true.
Dude,
That's
we went
true.
through it pretty in depth. Again, probably not as much as I should have, but it was pretty in depth what I told you the expectations had to be, because it was my name, and I kept telling you and everybody else that this business is me. This is my name.
Yeah.
It has to be done like this, and this. This is what we have to look for before you leave the job site. This is what I expect you to tell the customers. Phone calls before you get there,
Yeah.
when you leave.
That's true.
So I feel like I set plenty of expectations. Again, probably not as many as I should have, but I think the expectations
agree
were
with that.
definitely set.
I guess.
even though he doesn't remember, but that's okay.
No, now that you say that, the only thing I was paying attention to was pay and what I was going to be doing. The rest was all right.
And look at you now. Look how far you've come. Wow, what a success story.
So, quick story. We had an employee that we just had to let go a couple of months ago. We set expectations with him every quarter, okay? Every single quarter. And we had the same problem for, 3 quarters consistently that he wasn't producing, okay? Like I said, we have certain criteria you have to meet with production and stuff like that. He didn't meet it those 3. So we finally took his performance bonus away, okay?
What happened, Jeremy?
He said, "Why is this happening? I thought I was doing everything right." He threatened physical violence against our GM. He started stealing from the company, stealing time to make up for his bonus. We had to fire him, basically. But we set those expectations. He didn't listen. He didn't follow through. And he was surprised. I don't know how he was surprised, right?
What do you mean I'm getting fired?
Well,
I only stole 11 grand.
Why is this happening? So even though we set expectations, they weren't met. But it was pretty crappy situation.
So that's interesting because we talk about setting expectations. I feel like is easy, right? Mm-hmm. It's easy to sit somebody down and be like, "Hey, here's all the things that I want you to do."
Yeah.
And this kind of drifts into the second part, which is managing expectations, right? Because I think sometimes you got to come back and revisit that stuff.
Oh, you have to.
Like, hey, man, all right, here's what I thought we were going to get out of you.
Yes.
We're not getting that out of you, right? So let's revisit this and say, okay, well, what can we get?
Yeah.
And how can you develop that person? And I know there's a threshold, right? Mm-hmm. Where you say, okay, we've done our part. We're investing an exorbitant amount of time in this person.
Yeah. If they're uncoachable,
it's taking away from other people, right? And so at some point, but you don't always have that luxury.
No.
So for the people who are out there listening to this right now, and are in a position of authority over other people, mm-hmm. these are important things for you to kind of internalize, I think, and say, okay, am I setting clear standards and expectations? Am I giving clear feedback? Mm-hmm. And am I giving it in a way that this person is receiving it?
Yeah.
Right. So those are kind of the 3 components to it. And then for the people out there who are maybe somewhere in between, right? Because we all have a boss.
Yeah.
Like everybody is answering to somebody, right?
I don't answer to anybody. I answer to nobody.
I'm telling you.
Well, everybody,
please don't. Please don't tell my wife.
Yeah, but we all answer to somebody in some form or fashion, right? And so, if you're not getting that type of feedback, mm-hmm. then really I think you need to kind of go get it.
For sure.
You know what I mean? Because
nobody does a perfect job. You there's always some room for improvement. And the way we kind of get around that is when there is a negative thing that we bring up in a quarterly interview, we not only help them understand why they did it wrong, what we expect, but we give them the opportunity to make goals of how they think they can fix it and where they want to be at the next quarterly interview. Because I think if they're kind of included in the fix and the solution, they're more likely to make those changes and strive to do better. Because if you're just telling people negative things and trying to set expectation without them being bought in, like you said, with hard-headed people, they're not going to give a crap. They're going to be like, well, I think I'm doing fine, whatever.
Yeah, and I think it's important too to get expectation. I mean, we lay out expectations for our employees, right? Mm-hmm. But I think it's equally important to get expectations from our employees too.
Absolutely.
So like, what do you need to be successful?
Correct.
How do you prefer to get your feedback? And you'll kind of tune it as you go along. But I think it's important. And one thing that we talk about, one thing that I like to do, especially when I'm evaluating senior leaders in our organization, is 360 degrees of feedback. So I have. So you work for me, I have my perception of you, mm-hmm. but I want to know what your peers think about you. And I also want to know what the people who work for you think about you.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Because you'll see, and
do you find a lot of people, like when you ask that question, a lot of your employees have a buttload of restraint? Because I don't think that a lot of people, if you're sucking at your job as a employer, are going to be like, yeah, you got a lot to change. I feel like, well, if Jeremy asked me that question, I'd be honest with him because I have a relationship with Jeremy. Be like, dude, you suck at this, this, and this. But do you find like that being super helpful?
So you have to take it with a grain of salt, right? Because sometimes you give somebody an opportunity to unload on their boss.
Dude, they go nuts.
They're going to unload on their boss, and so you have to kind of say, okay, how much of this is,
reality.
Just you being angry?
Yeah.
and how much of this is something that I really need to be paying attention to and take action on, right? And so that's something you kind of have to think about.
Because, I mean, crap rolls downhill, so they say, right? So if you don't set proper expectations up high, how are your other employees supposed to follow?
Yeah, and I'm curious because I have the way the military does it, which is very, like Colton was talking about, it's very structured and rigid when it's followed correctly. Spoiler alert, it's not always followed correctly. But when we do follow it correctly, I think it's pretty effective. But, there's always a layer of subjectivity, right? And so everybody's gonna set standards differently. And so I'm curious to hear how you've done it, what you've seen success in, and what you've struggled with. And I'm looking at Colton.
I think for the most part, for us, for the small businessman, you have to find somebody that is willing to be a manager and follow expectations, but somebody who's absolutely capable. If you get some freaking goofball who's just absolutely not capable of following expectations, you're setting yourself up for failure right there, right? So,
well, what do you mean, especially in the construction industry, what do you mean capable? Like, I think everyone is capable to chop wood.
Well, chop wood, but not follow direction and stick to the expectation of whatever project you're on. I think there's I wouldn't say very few, but there's not as many people that are capable of following like direction and keeping expectations. I think there's too many people out there that are just becoming lazy and don't necessarily care. They don't have any buy-in in what they're doing. They're just there for a paycheck, so they're not going to give a crap what you tell them. I think there's an overwhelming amount of people that do that.
That might be the most negative evaluation of the
but it's true.
Current labor force that I've heard in a long time.
Okay, so
no,
where are
right.
we going with the labor force? It's not getting better.
But okay, I think the important takeaway from what you're talking about, at risk of drifting too far off of topic,
yes,
is that you have a measurable standard that you're setting, and
there
they understand it, right?
Yes. Boom.
I like that. Well, thank you so much, you guys, for listening. It has been so fun getting to know Steve. I've gotten to know Steve just a little bit more, and I've known him for years. The things you know when you start a podcast together. Mm-hmm. Now we have to try and do our sign off.
You have to do it while you're smiling. I heard you can tell.
You can.
Okay,
you can
keep
hear
going.
smiling.
You can hear smiling.
You can.
You can hear if someone's smiling.
For real.
Grow up, Colton, versus grow up, Colton.
That's tone.
Grow up, Colton. Your tone changes when you smile. It's your face.
Watch me. You suck, Steve. You suck, Steve.
There's a difference.
You can't hear
I
it.
can tell. You're going to listen back and be like, I can tell. Thank you, everybody, for listening to our podcast.
That was perfect.
Well, thanks for talking before I finished.
We want your feedback.
You get all sexy.
Speaking of managing expectations, we need to manage your expectations.
This is doing really good. I like how you're saying it needs to be like more stupid and freaking.
Yeah, no, it's plenty stupid.
Well, that's all we have today. Thanks for listening.
Okay, so speaking of managing expectations, we want to manage your expectations. So give us your feedback. Look us up on Facebook. Work harder, not smarter. We'll figure that out.
You're gonna have
to. All right. Look us up on Facebook. Work harder, not smarter.
Do you know the podcast that you are on? You're a co-host on.
I'm on this new terrible podcast.
He said podcast.
All right. Speaking of managing, get it together, everybody. Work smarter, not harder.
No.
Work hard.
Look us up on Facebook.
Because your mind's like, why would you do that?
Work harder. All right. Speaking of managing expectations, we want to manage your expectations. So look us up on Facebook. Work harder, not smarter podcast. Correct?
Love it.
That's
Love
it.
it.
That's
You nailed
one.
it.
No,
that's the one.
Send it. And let us know what you think. And let us know why we're wrong, and also what other topics you want us to be wrong about.
Whether you like this episode or not, please subscribe, because eventually we might come out with something that you like.
You don't want to miss it.
You don't want to miss it. Might be good stuff. We're changing people's lives, Steve. Whether you like it or not, you're part of something big, baby.
Well, so change is not always good. So just cage the expectation.
No, if you guys liked it, please check out the links to support us. And if you didn't, change your opinion. Okay.
That's perfect. Do it.